Paul's going to say, you got to be careful how you exercise your freedoms. And we'll see in chapter 9 that he's going to use himself as a personal example. So the first half of the chapter, he says, I've got right, meaning authority, to do what? Do you remember what it was? To be paid for the preaching of the gospel, to get my physical support for my spiritual work. Now, he made a great argument and a great case, but the purpose was to set up the second half of the chapter where he says, but I never use that right. Because there's something that trumps my liberty, my right, and that's love. And love is going to limit the use of your liberty because you're looking for the greater good. So we have this saying, I might have a right to do it, but I must ask, is it the right thing to do? Because just because you have the right to do it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So Lord willing, we get to chapter 10, I'll give you a checklist of how to process things in your mind. Like, okay, this is lawful. Should I act on it or not? And so you can filter this activity through a series of questions so you can decide whether it's the right thing to do. We'll do that later. Yes?
Paul's kind of in a catch-22. If he took the money, they would say he was preaching for the money. And if he didn't take the money, then you must not be a real apostle.
That's right. So he said, I robbed other churches just so I could preach to you. And so, but this is where we pick up ourselves in verse 19, because he says, you know, I had this right, but I made myself, although I'm free, as a slave to all men. Now, a slave is the lowest form in their society, a servant. And Paul willingly took that position. Where did he get that from, by the way? Jesus. He said, who's the greatest among you? And he said, well, it's the servant. Isn't that me? Isn't that what he's doing? You know, he washed their feet. He died for them. He led them. And so Paul says, I become a slave to all, but here's the purpose. What is it? To win some more individuals. So it's not self-deprecating. It's not because we have a low image of ourselves. It's not because we're going to defer to people. What's the motivation of giving up rights and liberties? Just want to save another soul. So how will me giving up some of my liberties garnish a new soul for the kingdom? Well, that's what Paul's going to talk about, and we have to explore. But again, the word slave, it's the very term that is used other places. It's not a special term for a preacher. It's just a slave. You belong to someone else. And he says, I want to win. In other words, he's trading his rights to win something else. Now, I want you to notice this chart here. The status, I'm free from all men, right? That's his current status. No one owns me except Jesus Christ. But here's his action. I became a slave to all. But you have to notice the purpose. It's to win some more. Now, will you win all? No. But just win some more. And so this is the key, because when we get into this text, when we talk about becoming all men, a lot of people think, oh, I can accommodate others and their lifestyles, and I can let their culture and become part of my culture. Because after all, I want to become all things to all people. And so it does, in the Christian community, starts compromising. That to win more, we're just going to become like the world. All right? And I can do things in my own personal life because I'm going to be like the culture around me. And now what Paul said, I become all things to all men. No. What's the purpose? It's not just so you can be like the rest of the world. It's so you can win a soul. That's the reason you become like someone else. And so we'll keep that in mind when we make some application here. And so we look in verse 19 and go on, and he gives some specific examples. And verse 20, to the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win the Jew. So there's the action, the purpose. To those under the law, of course that's Jews under the law, as under the law, although I'm not myself under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. Let me give you a couple examples of that, and then so you get to see exactly what Paul's talking about here. And the example I want you to see is in Acts 16, the first one. All right? We referred to it hastily last week, but I want you to read it. In Acts 15, what happens? Acts 15, for you you Acts students that have memorized it. All right, and what was the big conference about? Do we have to circumcise Gentiles in order to be saved? And the answer was, definitely not. And Paul refused to circumcise Titus. No way. All right? So, with that being said, they wrote a letter to take out to all these Christians in the Gentile realm. But in chapter 16, remember, the conference is just over. He came to Derbe, verse 1, and to Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timothy. Well, that's the Timothy that we read about in 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy. He was the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, but his father was a Greek. So we got a mixed marriage here, right? And he was well spoken of by the brethren who were in Lystra and Iconium, and Paul wanted this man to go with him. So he took him and circumcised him. Whoa, Paul. You just had this big argument, and you debated people. You went down there, you stood your ground, and now you just turn around and circumcise this guy? What's going on?
You're trying to be all things to all people. If you're trying to win souls, then you got to be in their mindset.
All right, how does this becoming all things to all people? Is it compromising the gospel? No. What is he doing? Let him explain himself. You're right.
He's just trying to, whoever Timothy is going to help win, if he's not circumcised, then they're thinking, well, hey, what?
Okay. All right, you're right.
He can't go into the Jewish temples.
All right, and that's what you're getting at. Because Paul, by tradition, when he gets into a new town, where does he go? Why does he go to synagogue? There's Jews there, but why does he go there? Jew first, then the Gentiles. They are waiting for the Christ, right? Now, if Timothy is coming along and they recognize him for however they're doing that he's not circumcised, is Paul getting him in there? Yeah, I don't know how they're going to check that. All right. Is he going to get him in there? No. So is he circumcising Timothy to succumb to this pressure that you got to be circumcised to be saved? Is that why he's doing it? No. Huh? So the gospel won't be hindered. I'm becoming all things. So is it lawful to be circumcised if you want? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. When people insist you do it, then Paul says, no way. But when it comes a matter of liberty, Timothy, let's do it. Now, is that a sacrifice for young Timothy as an adult to get circumcised? I become all things to all men. It wasn't for his own pleasure? No, and sometimes we take this out of context. See, I can do things because I can become all things to all people, live just like them for me. No, it's sacrificial. You're making yourself a slave, right? So you can win the more. Someone had their hand up. Yes.
He did that to cut down on the resistance that he knew he was going to get into.
Exactly. That's right. Yes.
And when we say he became all things, it didn't mean that he went down and hung out at the bar and was drinking and all that. We got to understand it was still within the context of what Christ wanted.
That's right. And see, that's the misnotion that people want to make this mean, all right?
Paul needed him.
Well, yes, he wanted him.
He wanted him.
That's what it says.
So he needed that assistance, obviously, for the work he was doing.
Yes.
And so he did what he had to do.
That's right. So verse 3, Paul wanted him this. He took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in those parts, for they all knew his father was a Greek. So to be expedient and make the gospel not hindered, let's just get him circumcised. Look in chapter 20. This one's a little more challenging because it requires a little more background. But in chapter 20, Paul is finished with his third missionary journey. And when he's going through Macedonia and Corinth, he's been collecting monies that these people have been setting aside every first Sunday of the week for famine relief for Christians back down there in Judea. So when Paul's coming now in chapter 20 to Jerusalem, he's got all this money, and with him are all these Gentile Christians who are carrying their gifts. One from the church of Philippi, one from the church at Corinth, and on and on and on. And so they're coming, and these Jews see Paul with all these what? His first concern was, will the Jewish church, Christians, accept Gentile money, Gentile Christians? He was really worried about it. And he's asking people to pray for him. His first thing was, thank God they accepted the grace of these people. They accepted it. See, it's a racial thing, right? But then there was going to be, it comes an issue. We'll look in chapter 20 and verse, did I say 20? I meant 21. Okay? So verse 17, we come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. Chapter 21, verse 17. And the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. And after he greeted them, he began to relate them one by one the things which God done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they began glorifying God, and they said to him, you see, brother Paul, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed. And they're all zealous for the law. Now he's talking about Jewish people there in Jerusalem. And they have been told about you, that you're teaching all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to their customs. Now, was Paul doing that? No. But was he telling them you don't have to be circumcised to be saved? Yes. See how it's all going to be mistranslated when he gets back down to Jerusalem. All right? Is he saying Moses was a heretic and don't follow him anymore? No, he's saying Moses predicted Christ and pointed to Christ, and Christ is the answer, the fulfillment of the law. So things get twisted, all right? So here is their wisdom and a request of Paul. Verse 22, what then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Therefore do this, that we will tell you. Okay, what is it? We have 4 men who are under a vow. Now we don't know what this vow is for sure, but it sounds like it's a Nazirite vow, that where you did not cut your hair, you did not drink wine, you couldn't go into a dead person, and it was a willful choice, and you did it for a set amount of time, 2 years, 2 months, 7 years, whatever. After the vow is over, you shaved your hair, you went to the altar, made a sacrifice, the hair was burnt, and all that thing. So here's what he's saying. We have 4 men who are under vow. Take them and purify yourself along with them. Pay their expenses in order they may shave their heads, and all will know that there's nothing to the things which they've been told about you, but you yourself walk orderly, keeping the law. But concerning the Gentiles who have believed, we wrote, having decided they should abstain from meat sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what is strangled, from fornication. That's the letter from Acts 15. So Paul took them in. The next day, purifying himself along with them, went in the temple, giving notice of the completion of the days of the purification, until the sacrifice was offered for each of them. What is Paul doing? Is he keeping the old law? Huh? Appeasing them, or becoming all things to all men? Now, is he saying we need to sacrifice for forgiveness of sins under the old law? No, this was a voluntary vow that you could make in dedication to God. Samson was a Nazirite. Hannah dedicated her son as a Nazirite. But it's something you did willfully, and you could do it today. And Paul says, okay, there's nothing wrong with this. All things are lawful. I'm free for all men. But I will show them that I'm not against the law, because it has brought us to Christ. He goes through this process, which is very Jewish, and it shows everyone that Paul's not anti-Moses. Becoming all things to all men so that he can what? Now, did that cost him? Yeah, he had to pay. He had to go and go along with this whole issue of the sacrifice and the cleansing. But he's doing it because he wants to not hinder the gospel. Yes?
I bet there's, the majority of people in this room have been through some sort of sales business, small business, multi-levels and stuff. One of the things we were taught was you've got to neutralize their objections.
Yes?
That's what Paul's doing. He's neutralizing their objections to the gospel by becoming all things.
Okay.
Taking it out of the way. See, I'm not against you. There's no reason to be against me. And now you can listen.
Right.
Opening their ears by taking that objection away.
Okay, she says neutralizing the objection. That's in sales, and it is true. So then people will be open to what you have to say. Yes?
We gotta remember, we're also in an extremely interesting transition period right here, where the Jews have been doing these things
Yes?
religiously for thousands of years, and now suddenly there's, a new law, and, they're gonna be stepping on both sides of the camp.
Yeah.
While they transition.
But let's be careful to make it clear. Did Paul sin by doing this?
No.
And so was it lawful for him to do it? Yes. And again, he wasn't going back to the old law saying you have to practice this to go to heaven. He's just taking something that was a liberty. It wasn't required to take a vow, but if you did, there are certain procedures, and he's just going along with it. Now, so could you take that vow today? Yes. I don't see why not. Let me ask this. This might stun some people. Could you observe the Sabbath today if you wanted? Could you observe the Sabbath today if you wanted personally? There you go. If it hindered the gospel, you better not. Now, if people saw me observing the Sabbath, hey, what's wrong with you, Jack? Are you messed up on your understanding of the doctrine? But if you could do it because you wanted to privately, just stop working on Saturday just to remember God. I need a day off anyway. Could you do that? You think about that, all right?
Things with observing the Sabbath that has to do with having a kosher kitchen from sunup to sundown.
All right, so then how far are you going to go with it? That's right. But no, the kosher kitchen came later. That had nothing to do with the old law. That came later. About mixing meat and milk and all that. That was not in the old law. That's something that came much later. Yeah. But if you just didn't want to work on Saturday, could you? Circumcision. Don't raise your hand, but how many men here have been circumcised? Were you doing it because you're a Jew? Well, I don't think so. It's just a health or hygiene reason. Now they're even doubting if that's necessary, right? We do lots of things, becoming all things to all men, but it's not compromise. It's not accommodating. It's not to become like the world. Because the more the church becomes like the world, the more we become less like Christ. Let me say that again. Some churches think to attract more people, we have to become more like the world. It's reflected in their music, their lifestyles, their language, their relaxing. They're so casual. They talk about God as not our almighty God and Father. He's almost like the big guy upstairs, and it's so irreverent. You'll hear it in their sermons. It's so casual. The more you become common, like the world, the less we become holy like our God. And what attracts people to God and Christ is His holiness. The world is living among commonality, and they want something special and holy. They want something spiritual. They don't want more of the world. They're tired of the superficial. But yet that's the way the church is marketed today. More entertainment, just meet their needs under the guise of becoming all things to all men. That's not what Paul's talking about, is it? I hope you see it, okay?
Didn't Paul see the door closing to the Jews because of this accusation that he didn't keep the law of Moses? And at the same time, this was a test that the Jews were doing of him to see if he would go through it. He had to pay their expenses as well.
Yeah.
But then at the end of it, he said, walk orderly and keep the law. Did not Jesus keep the law when he was here?
Yeah. But we don't follow the law.
No, we don't.
I mean, we got to make it clear. But there are elements of the law that they're lawful, but this is an optional one. That's the key. It wasn't mandatory. It was optional. And he was in his rights to do it. He did not sin. Yes?
Some of the parallel verses in Romans 14:19 says, so then let us pursue what makes for peace.
That's right. Right.
Mutual upbuilding. In Jerusalem, he was pursuing what made for peace, because if he didn't, that would have been causing there would have been some more turmoil and dissension.
That's right.
Problems.
That's right. Exactly. So let me give you another example. Those without the law, who would that be? Gentiles. All right. I'll make it modern day. When you go, my most experience with Africa, so I'll talk about that. When you go to Africa and you're preaching, if you expect them to worship and to do everything exactly the way we do it. I mean, they still do the Lord's Supper, they still sing, they still preach, they still pray. But the way they do it, the order they do it, it's going to be totally different. And if you're going to be all upset and bent out of shape because they're not doing it the way you're used to it, you should probably stay home, all right? No, seriously, I say that seriously, all right? You even go to Hawaii, the guy that's preaching there is usually in open thong sandals and sometimes wearing shorts and Hawaiian shirt. And that's dressed up. All right, now hold your hands because I'm not done giving my sermon, okay? Just hang on. All right. So you go there and I will see more than once, in any trip, a lady sitting on it's not necessarily the front row because they don't have rows, they just have benches. You've seen the pictures. But she's sitting there just glued on me, listening to everything I say, the interpreter. But she's nursing her baby right there and everything's fully exposed. And I go, okay. Now, am I going to stop my sermon? Woman, cover up. Shame on you. Would that help or hinder?
Hinder.
All right? Now, where's the challenge? On her or on me? Yeah. Now, if you go to another place, there used to be places all the young women, before they're married, would show they're available, and they'd never wear anything from the waist up. Now, as their time, you say, well, in the name of Christ, we're going to teach morality, and we're going to teach some modesty there. And they've done that, and that largely is stopped now. If I lived there and worked there on a regular basis, might I encourage them, once I built a relationship, when you're nursing, take a blanket and just cover yourself. But in time, right? Now, there's a different way you would deal with that rather than judging them and shaming them, right? Now I see it all the time. In fact, there's a picture I had on the back because I put some pictures of my trips, and someone come by, whoa, is this in Africa? Yeah. I said, oh, that woman's nursing. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know it was in the picture. It was a group photo. All right? So that's part of what we're saying, becoming all things to all people so you can win more. We're trying to teach them up, not bring them down, but how you do it is important. Yes?
For the world to sacrifice animals and all of them go to Jerusalem every year, three, 4 times, people couldn't even be the size of an ant. It wouldn't fit. It's mechanically impossible to build.
Yeah?
Just think of that. All the sacrifices and everything.
There's a lot.
They couldn't do it.
That's right. All right. Yes, Heather.
Real quickly, I was just thinking about how in Chile, when I was talking about how Christmas was coming up.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Like, yeah, it'd be nice to have a tree where I'm living. And then a sister came and took me aside, much older than me, and said, I'm really concerned about you, Heather. We need to talk about Christmas. I need to know where you stand on that, because I'm worried that you want to celebrate it. Of any kind, just having a tree in your house.
All right.
Any semblance to that holiday. And so we had a lengthy talk, and she's just like, Christians here in Chile, we do not celebrate
All right.
Christmas in any tangible, visible form.
It's a great example, so I'm glad you brought it up. Catholic dominated, right? South America. Christ was born on Christmas Day. It's all about his celebration. the manger scenes and all that, and Christmas mass and everything. So there is an attitude, anything associated with Christmas is sinful, right? Now we know, it's another discussion, we'll have it later, that there's no such thing as an idol, so Christmas tree is not idolatry. Let's just say that. That's going to be already 1 Corinthians 8. We already talked about that. Brad taught that. But if they are not going to accept you because you're demanding to exercise your liberty to celebrate Christmas, are you helping the gospel or hindering it? Do y'all see that? Yep. So if you go down there to Chile and you're going to work with the brethren and try to convert them to Christ, what thing are you going to give up voluntarily? Celebrating Christmas. Not because you don't have a right to, because you're making yourself a slave to all their weaknesses, right? Isn't that what Christ did? He made himself a slave, gave up his rights because of our weakness. Now that's counterintuitive to a lot of people that are coming in the church. They say, well, I have rights and everything. I should be able to do them and don't judge me. It's not about rights. Is it the right thing to do when we're trying to win souls? So we talked about last week some of the things people have, like social drinking in their dress and all that, and going, to certain venues. It's all those things when they put them under the realm, I can do all things. No, that's for self, see? This is all about doing all things to win others. It's always sacrificial. Paul's giving up rights, not exercising rights. See the difference? And so don't allow ourselves to use this language to excuse or give ourselves some kind of liberty to live more like the world. That's not what he's talking about, all right? I can't make it clear enough. To the weak, I became what? Isn't that what Heather just talked about? They're weak in their understanding, not weak people. Just haven't been taught up. And it's okay. No problem. I can worship with them. Yes?
One of the commentaries, Jack, I thought was actually says that there's 3 groups of people here.
Yes.
When he says to the Jews, he's talking about Jews ethnically, and then under the law, Jews are Jews religiously, and those without the law, then Gentiles. And so,
right.
One commentary said it's ethnic Jews, religious Jews, and then Gentiles.
And that might be the case. In the 4th group, some say is Christians that are weak in their faith. That's why I have Christians question mark. There could be 4 groups here. Yes. Yes.
In chapter 8, Paul just talked about that it's okay to eat meat unless it makes your brother stumble.
Right.
In Acts 15,
Stumble means sin too. It doesn't mean you're upset. It means sin. Yeah. We'll come back to that later.
in Acts 15, he specifically told the Gentiles, don't eat meat sacrificed to idols.
What does it say exactly? It says refrain from what?
It was the, no blood. No
Things strangled.
Things strangled.
Um,
Fornication, but one of the things was,
right, I know.
told them not to.
Abstain from things sacrificed to idols, from blood, and things strangled and fornication. All right?
So the point is like the whole Christmas thing. It would be sinful for those Christians in Chile to participate in the Christmas stuff because it was so immersed in the Catholic doctrine.
Right.
Just like it would have been sinful for the Gentiles to eat that meat.
Right.
Because it was so immersed in that idol worship. But to eat meat was not
Not in
sinful.
self. And that's why Paul argued.
To celebrate Christmas is not sinful.
That's right.
But to do it then, or for those people to do it, that would be wrong.
That which I have a right to do can become sinful for me to do if it causes someone else to stumble or hinders the gospel.
Or if I think it's going to be sinful.
That's right.
to do it.
That's right. If I personally think it's sinful. Exactly. So, love, in other words, I'm seeking your best interest, not mine. And limit's our liberty. You see that? We're talking about not milk of the word, we're talking about meat of the word. This is attitudes that we grow into as we mature as a Christian. We have to process a lot of things. But when we come more like Christ, what did Peter say? Add to your faith virtue, virtue, knowledge, knowledge, self-control, self-control, perseverance, perseverance, what he says, brotherly love, and the last thing what? Love. Love is always sacrificial. Love says you're more important than me. It's the highest virtue, but it comes, you're working on it all the time, but you never get there until you start to mature and grow as a Christian. That's what we're talking about here. These are mature concepts. All right? And so at first blush, a lot of people, no way, that doesn't seem right. But as more you digest it, yeah, that's what Christ did for me. Okay? Can we move on? Yes.
Just jumping ahead for a second, that's why when you get to 13, that chapter on love, he begins it, if I do all these religious things, whether it's have all the faith and the tongues of angels or the giving and all this, if I do all that to the ultimate extreme, but I don't have love.
Profits mean nothing. Good point. Yeah. All right. So, I'll just skip back because we talked about it. In Corinth, the Olympic Games were held in Athens every 4 years. The year before, I think it was the third year, they had the Isthmian Games. Because remember we saw on the map of Corinth, there was this little isthmus, this little narrow thing, and that's where Corinth was, in Achaia. That's where they held these games. They were athletic games, running, wrestling, and all that. That's what Paul is going to now use because he's speaking their language. They understand this because this is a big thing in their city. It's like having the Olympics every 4 years and you're in Salem. All right? Well, that's what's happening here. So I want you to notice what he has to say to them because he's addressing their pushback. And at the same time, he's exhorting them to excel as Christians. Be victorious. All right? So what do you mean? So look what he says. Verse 23, I do all things for the sake of the gospel that I may become a fellow partaker of it. Do you not know? Of course they do. That those who run in a race all run. But how many win? Well, just one. Well, they know that. And when he gets to the victory line, he gets this wreath. It's a plant, and it fades after a while. That's what they got the Isthmian Games as a victory prize. But only one, he says, receives the prize. So he says, now personally, you run as a Christian in such a way that you what? Win. Win. Well, what do you mean, Paul? Well, he's going to explain himself. Everyone who competes in the games, what does he do? What does it say in your Bible? Self-control. What does yours say? Anything different? Temperance. Oh, that's an interesting word. But it's the idea of self-control. What's he talking about an athlete? If you want to compete and excel and finish, can you eat all you want?
No.
Can you stay up as long as you want?
No.
All right. Do you have to exercise self-control? I don't want to work out today. No, you're going to have, well, that's the next word he's going to come up with is discipline. You exercise self-control. Well, I want to do this. It's my right. It's my liberty. No, I give them up because I want to what? Win. It's not about competing against others. I just want to win. I want to cross the finish line. So he's trying to take this attitude that it is necessary to compete athletically and saying Christianity is a race. All you got to do is finish the line. Not first. All you got to do is what? Finish. And Satan is trying to take us out. So you have to practice self-control. They do it, verse 25, to receive a perishable wreath, but we in an imperishable. See, theirs was that piece of plant. Therefore, I run in such a way as not without aim. In other words, I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. That's why I give these things up so willfully. Now he switches athletic events, and he went from running to boxing. And I box in such a way, not as beating the air, because if you're going to win in a boxing match or wrestling match, what do you got to do? Jordan, where are you? Is he here tonight? Oh, good. He's not here because he's scared. I was telling Dane this today. I've been telling Jordan, and he's been training jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right? And he's getting pretty good at it, from what I understand. And if you look at him, he's pretty buff, right? 2, 3, 4 years ago, I said, hey, Jordan, you and me want to go at it? And he said, there'd be 2 hits. He'd go, oh, yeah? I said, me hitting you and you hitting the ground, all right? So like 2 months ago, he says, hey, Jack, remember those 2 hits? You ready to go? And I go, yeah. And so every now and then, I'll look at him and I'll see him back. Hey, Jordan. He goes, huh? And I go, and he goes, oh, yeah, right. He rolls his eyes. Now, if I ever got involved in a fight, what's the only way I'm going to take him down? I have to what? Run. Run. That's right. I got to connect on the first hit or else it's over, right? I got to hit him. Paul's saying the same thing. I box in such a way as just not beating the air. Now, verse 27, I buffet my body. What does your Bible say instead of buffet?
Discipline my body.
All right. Literally, it means to hit yourself in the face or hit yourself. And that's what the word literally means. It's this idea of self-discipline, bringing yourself under control. Now, is he talking about just his body, just athletically? No. Yeah, I got these desires. I want to do this. I want that. But there comes a moment in my life that I realize spiritually it's not worth it. What's worth it is finishing the race. And sometimes I got to beat myself. Say, no, I'm going to give this up. It's okay. Because the glory makes it worthwhile. And that's what a boxer does. And we admire athletes, don't we? We go, man, look at those guys. They've put in so much self-discipline, so much sacrifice. And boy, wouldn't it be nice to get a gold medal in the Olympics? People all admire it, but very few people are willing to put the work in. Isn't that true? It's very few that are, and most of it's the mental discipline. Now, Christians, that's what he's saying, the same thing. Sometimes we have to buffet our body. Now, here's why. I make it my slave, lest possibly, after I preach to others, I myself should be disqualified. That's probably the saddest thing. Sometimes in the Olympics, when a guy's favored, maybe on the 400-yard or meter race, or maybe the 4x100 relay, he's disqualified. Maybe because he jumped out of the blocks twice. One time, but the second time you're disqualified. Sometimes it's because he got into the other person's lane just for a step, and he's DQ'd. He should have won. He was the best, but he didn't follow the rules, right? So the worst thing Paul says is, I've saved all these people, but I didn't buffet and bring my own body in discipline, and I'm disqualified. Wouldn't that be the saddest thing? Now, the word disqualified is the word dokimos, D-O-K-I-M-O-S. I have enough time because it's going to come up. And it means to prove, to test. And it harkens back to the idea when you test a metal for purity to see if it's pure gold, you put heat to it, right? And if it passed the test, it's been proven. When you put an A in front of it, just like atheist, it means not you passed the test, it means what? You failed the test. A negates it. That's what this word means, disqualified. The judge looked like, you failed. Disqualified. He's saying there's a lot writing on here. Now, with that being said, we're going to take a preview of chapter 10 because there are no chapter breaks when Paul wrote this letter. He didn't go to bed and say, oh, man, I finished chapter 9. Tomorrow I'm going to start chapter 10, writing it. No, he just kept going, right? I mean, I don't know when, but there were no chapter breaks. So the thought continues even though we make a break. So look what he says. We're going to be now in chapter 10. I already read all those things. Chapter 10, the main theme is going to be, again, giving God glory in everything we do. That's how we run the race. Part 1 is going to be the bad example of Israel. Part 2 is how then are we going to exercise liberties. part 1, he's going to say, you know, no one had more blessings than Israel when they went into the land of Canaan. But what happened to most of them? Disqualified. And we're going to look at that. So Paul's going to say at the end of this section, verse 13, look in verse 12. I'm in 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 12. Well, actually, verse 11. We haven't looked at what happened to Israel, but he says these things, whatever they are, happened to them as an example, and they were written for who? Our sakes, our instruction, so we can learn from their mistakes. Verse 12, therefore, the therefore points back to where? All the way to verse 1, where he says, let's talk about Israel and how they blew it. Therefore, you be sure that if you think you stand, take heed lest you what? You know what the word fall is? Didn't pass the test. You failed. It's not just fall and stumble, you failed. This is what Paul says. I don't want to be disqualified. Take heed, because a lot of people think, I'm okay. I come to church. I'm a Christian. And they live more like the world than they live like God, but they think they're okay because they don't buffet their body. They don't bring any discipline. They want to become part of the world. And Paul says, take heed. Watch out. That's how they failed themselves, because they didn't fear God. Take heed. If you think you're standing, unless you're going to be disqualified. Yes?
In the context of everything here, the standing might be them going, I have knowledge and I have the rights to exercise liberties and I have all this, but they're not doing it out of look. It's been inside.
That's right.
The idea of love here, and they'll do it again there in 13.
That's right.
Take heed, standing what you stand with your knowledge, what you think you know,
Right.
lest you fall.
That's right.
In the bigger items, just like the Pharisees did as they tied their hands to come in.
That's good.
Mislead your man.
It's head knowledge and hasn't moved into a practical working knowledge. And that's what faith has to do. So let me just, I got enough time to just introduce it. But I'm not promoting Ross. But how many people have been Ross Grill and had their hamburger?
They're terrible.
You know, some of you like Red Robin's, you spend $12 for a hamburger. Go to Ross for $4.49, and they have the best hamburgers. The best ones, Sunnyside's okay. The one there at the Y at Commercial and Liberty, don't go to that one. But the best one is in West Salem. Yes, I've been to all of them. All right? Now, I was doing my taxes, and I look at all my receipts. I've been to Ross too many times with my wife and kids, all right? So, can you overindulge eating something too much? And what happens if you eat something too much? Well, is there a problem with too much of anything? Can a good thing become a bad thing? Yes. All right, thank you. That's why Paul says, take heed lest you fall. Now, here's our example, and we're going to just introduce it. Next week, we'll come back to it, because I just want to prime your taste buds. Anything that is a good thing can become a bad thing. How about too much food? How's that can be that bad for you? Oh, health reasons, diabetes, whatever, right? Heart issues. Isn't that true? All right. How about too much money? Oh, no. Too much of money is a wonderful thing. Can it be a bad thing? What does it do? The biggest thing it can do. Stop trusting in God and start trusting in your resources. It does it all the time. How about too much intelligence? What does that make people do? Haughty and look down on others. And I don't need God, and I'm smarter than anyone else. Happens too much. How about too much fame? Spoiled and have this idea of that they have all these entitlements. Everyone there is to serve them. How much too much power? Well, we see that's impressive. Too much chocolate. Never a problem. Don't go there, all right? The thing I'm trying to say is, they were 4 years in Egypt. They're delivered by God. They plundered the Egyptians. They got a land that they didn't grow, the vineyards they didn't plant, the cities they didn't build. They had blessing upon blessing. They had too much, and they were slaughtered in the wilderness. We're going to see what happened wrong next week. Take heed lest you fall. Take heed lest you miss next week's class. All right?